Ah, crap! I forgot. Deus Ex. There we go. Ah, that looks right. I had to update what game the stream is set to. How's everybody doing today? How's everybody doing? I have a bit of a headache. I've been working a lot. Been out in the sun way too much. So we can't. The long winter days can't come soon enough. You never asked for this? You're literally JC Denton, man. Did you know that? That's the. So yeah, this is the 2017 GDC Postmortem by Warren Spector. It talked about Deus Ex. I pilfered a lot from this GDC talk when I made my video on the game. But I still think it's going to be fun to come into this thingamajig he did, because you really get to go a bit into his head as a game designer. So, I'm kind of tempted to go and get coffee, but I think we should get it started. It's already kind of late. Let's go.
Okay, I've been told it's time to get started. Wow, there is a huge echo up here. That's going to be fun for the next hour.
Why are there no captions?
All right, so you folks all do realize you're here to hear about a 17-year-old game, right?
You guys all realize
that,
that,
yes.
right?
So for starters, people often ask me which of my games I like the best, or which I think is the best, and don't ever ask a game developer that question. The closest I ever get to answering is saying that the game I'm most proud of is Deus Ex, for a variety of reasons. And I'm here today to talk about...
But his favorite game is the epic Mickey games he made.
How that game came to be. So let me start by telling you specifically what I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about the design philosophies behind the creation.
But also, I think that's a totally fair question to ask, and I think the game he's most proud of being Deus Ex, that might just be downstream of this is the game he had basically the most creative freedom on. I think he went to John Romero or somebody, and he just wrote him a blank check. Just do the game you want to make. I'll pay for it. I'm not going to interrupt you while you're making it, which is obviously the only way you can get something really, really good. And Deus Ex is
why
really,
I wanted to make
really
it.
good.
Then I want to talk about the history behind the making of the game. Third, we'll go into what we did right and what I did right and wrong. And then finally, we'll end with the response to the game, how the world responded. A lot of what you're going to hear and see today is common practice.
John Romero?
Rest assured that a lot of it was not common practice in.
See, I haven't forgotten.
When,
I haven't
we were working on this
forgotten.
game. Okay, so don't make too much fun of me for telling you things you already know. Yeah, make as much fun of me as you want. I don't care.
So that line, make as much fun of me as you want, I don't care. This is why I make so much fun of him in the Deus Ex video I made, where he's like dressed in shabby clothing with mustard stains on his shirt.
Start by talking about what Deus Ex actually is. Fictionally, it's a game set in a near-future dystopic cyberpunk version of our real world. It's a world where conspiracy theories are true, and it's kind of James Bond meets the X-Files by way of Neuromancer. I assume from the applause earlier, you guys all know that. Conceptually, I thought of Deus Ex as a genre-busting game, which, let me say, really enamored us to the marketing folks.
So,
they love that. If you ever want to make a marketing person unhappy, mash up genres together. They'll be your friend for life. But it was a genre mashup. It was part immersive simulation. It was part role-playing game. It was part first-person shooter, and it was part adventure game. So it was a bunch of stuff all mashed together. It's an immersive simulation because you feel like you're actually in the game world, or at least that's what we were trying to do. There's as little as possible getting in the way of you feeling like you're there.
So I worked on a video for a few days, maybe a couple of weeks even, when I was doing the Deus Ex retrospective I did, which was going to be the Conspiracies of Deus Ex. And I wanted to just lay out, here is the history of all of the sort of conspiracies that Deus Ex is cribbing from. So like Men in Black, Little Grey Aliens, and stuff like that. And I ultimately decided against it because I felt like, that would be an interesting video, but I don't think it would have ultimately contributed much to the conversation. And also, I think that video would have been a really, really quick. Like, no matter how much I disclaim, like, yeah, this is a video. This is talking about little gray aliens and like Men in Black and all that. And I'm like, nope, I don't personally believe in any of these conspiracy theories. Just talking about this for fun. I think if I had made that video, that would have been the highway into getting my channel banned for inappropriate content. I've always wanted to get into this game. It's good. I think the first couple of levels are kind of balls. But I think the game really does open up. I think there's also just a really sort of high upfront cost to getting started, because there's so many different systems you need to sift through and interact with to really make fun from the game. Because otherwise you're just going to be like crouching and you're going to be hiding behind crates and shooting at enemies. And it's like, yeah, you can do that. But that's not really the right way to play Deus Ex. I like the look of the first better than the last couple of Deus Ex games that Square Enix did. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that Deus Ex looks better with that. Like, he talked about Neuromancer earlier. I really like that the cybernetic augmentations in the first game, they don't really look like they were designed by Apple. They don't have like a beautiful UI or like a good aesthetic approved by a marketing team. But then in like Human Revolution, it really seems like they've spiffed that stuff all up. And I also just, I must prefer that sort of grungy, cyberpunky 90s aesthetic to that sort of wishy-washy nothing aesthetic I think the game's developed. Because every cyberpunk game and every cyberpunk media today just kind of looks the same. It looks like the RoboCop remake, it's just like slick, and it's like, this doesn't look interesting.
Kind of defines what an immersive simulation is for me. It's an RPG in that you play a role. You play JC Denton, which translates to me to an ROLE role, not an ROLL role. Okay. And you make choices that ensure you end up.
I had a conversation on Discord about that earlier.
With a unique avatar, and your character determines your.
I would turn on captions, but captions are not available.
Experience. So it's a role-playing game. It's an FPS because you see the world through your character's eyes, and your skill with virtual weapons is clearly an important factor. And it's an adventure game in that it's story-driven. Its narrative structure is completely.
Oh, hey, yeah, there you are.
And it involves character interaction and accumulation of objects to advance the plot. So it has a little bit of all of those things. And that's the most important thing. It's the combination of those genres.
I think this game came about, and he's probably going to talk about it. I think this is a game that came about when he was talking to Ken Levine, who was working on Thief at the time. And he asked him why you couldn't fight your way through problems. Because a game should just let you do anything, and that should really be a solution. I think there was some sort of interaction like that, or maybe it was. Yeah, I think Thief. I think Warren Spector's sort of hand on Thief really sparked the imagination with this one, and also Deus Ex is System Shock 3. People don't think it'd be that way, but it do. We'll maybe talk more about that, because a lot of the. If you look at the Shock series, so like System Shock into Bioshock, versus the Shock series as System Shock 1, System Shock 2, Deus Ex, you'll notice that just on the system design and on the sensibilities of the presentation and the experience, Deus Ex is a much, much cleaner continuation of System Shock 2 than Bioshock is. It came out I think Deus Ex comes out 2 or 3 years after, 2 or 3 years after System Shock 2, and Bioshock comes out like almost a decade later, and that's like a console-focused game, so they like had to streamline a bunch of stuff, and it's just like I think Deus Ex, you really can't appreciate the game fully until you've played the first System Shocks.
That was designed to ensure.
Yeah, because he sucked at the stealth. Yeah.
I wanted the story to be as much yours as it was mine and my team's. Okay. So let me tell you where it began. This is going to get a little embarrassing.
The pillar of what makes a good immersive sim. Come to a door and you have multiple ways in. You can hack, bash your way in, lockpick your way in, or take a side route. Yeah, I mean, I think that because immersive sim is kind of like immersive sim basically just used to mean looking glass games. or Origin games. And then as those studios were destroyed and the staffers just spread out, scattered into the rest of the industry, different kind of ways of conceptualizing of what exactly makes an immersive sim came about. But I think that a good way, because everybody argues about how to define immersive sim, and that's largely because of this, because there were 100 people who worked for these studios, and now every single one of them had their own sort of definition, and they took those different definitions, and now there is no way to perfectly define an immersive sim without being too specific and excluding some games that clearly are immersive sims. But also, you can't do it without, like, to capture all immersive sims, you're also going to get in games that clearly aren't immersive sims. I think that one way of conceptualizing an immersive sim just is you need to sort of think of it as an aesthetic above everything else. I think one way, and that kind of goes to what you're talking about with the door, is that I think an immersive sim can really be thought of as a first-person game where interacting with the environment is a core component, and every mechanism for interaction is fully realized. I don't think that emergent gameplay necessarily is essential to an immersive sim. A lot of people think that. I just don't see it, because frankly, I don't think people really interact that much with the emergent gameplay. But for every interaction to be realized, that's more like you play Starfield, and sometimes you just can't kill characters. Why? Because they didn't factor that into a decision tree. Whereas New Vegas, you can just kill anybody at any point for whatever reason, and the game is like, it adapts to it. Except an immersive sim would do that to every object too, and every other form of interaction. I hate the term immersive sim, but it's kind of a you know it when you see it kind of thing. Yeah, because people want to define immersive sim by presentation, but it's not a presentation motif. What it is basically it's much more like defining a movement. Like, this is a movement, like rock and roll. Rock and roll is not, you can't define rock and roll by a sound. You can't define rock and roll by the people involved in it. You can define it really only as this was a specific movement in music. Same with punk. Same with like hippie music. An immersive sim, this was basically a very specific way which these very hyper-specific studios that all collaborated to some extent approached designing games in this specific era. And since then, every post sort of immersive sim after those studios shut down is kind of like you're borrowing elements from those games, but you're not really a part of that movement because that time has passed. You can be like post-immersive sim something, but defining it by presentation, I ultimately don't think works. Give your player freedom to tackle the challenges they face. Yeah, but like, Minecraft, I don't know.
It all began with Dungeons and Dragons. Is there anybody here who hasn't played D&D? Raise your hand if you haven't played D&D, and then leave. Okay.
That's also another big component to this in Dungeons and Dragons, is that a lot of the immersive sim qualities came about because if you're kind of looking at the history of games, you need to look at Dungeons and Dragons is a really like one of the building blocks of all game design. But for video games specifically, you have to go to Ultima and you have to go to Wizardry. Because Wizardry is the foundation of the entire Japanese video game industry, and Ultima is the foundation of the Western game design industry. So from Ultima you get Doom, and you get Deus Ex, but you also get like the Call of Duties. Everything goes back to Ultima. Every role-playing game, every first-person shooter, it all comes back to Ultima. And like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, this is all just Wizardry. Kingsfield, that's Wizardry. So like you get Dark Souls because of Wizardry, and for D&D specifically in video games, this is where I think Deus Ex is a really interesting counterexample. I've been doing a lot of Pillars of Eternity videos recently because Pillars of Eternity not Pillars of Eternity, but like Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate, they take Dungeons and Dragons and they program the dungeon master so that you don't have a human being organizing the rule set, you have a computer. And there's a lot of benefits and there's a lot of drawbacks to that setup. Whereas games like Deus Ex, they don't use numbers in quite the same way. Even though there may be, like in immersive sims, there may be some dice rolls here and there, but it's more, how do we utilize the qualities of the computer and exclude all of these sort of vestigial elements of traditional tabletop gaming and the idea of a dungeon master to tell stories just with this. And when you look at the late 90s PC era, late 90s, maybe a little bit into the early 2000s, but I really think it's late 90s. That's kind of the peak of this style of designing role-playing games.
All right. Like I said, it's been 17 years since the game came out, but it really started long before that. I am going to date myself horribly here, but it began.
And this is also why I'm sorry that we're 4 minutes in and I've been talking for 30 minutes. If anybody wants to really get deep into this, and like this era of making games and people who have kept this torch sort of alive, the best book I always recommend on game design is Chris Crawford. Hold on. I can't see it from here, and I don't want to stand up because I've already crossed my legs. It's Chris Crawford's, I think the book is called On Interactive Storytelling, because he used to work on a lot of the point-and-click adventure games. And he never gave up on that format. He just gave up on the industry because the industry wanted to move with these games in a very specific direction. And he was like, I can't, like, that's not the correct way of telling stories with video games. And he conceptualized of, rather than having the player have to solve a narrative, it is the role of the game to solve for a narrative around the player's actions. And so he conceptualized of the game much less as a set of obstacles and mechanics and more of, here is a story manager. And whenever the player makes a choice, the game needs to be able to read that choice in the context of storytelling, and it has to sort of naturally flow into a new sort of group or bracket of choices that the player can make, and they need to be able to thread the player through that. It's a really interesting book. It's really long. It's not that long, actually. It's like
and it began with a game of D&D. The day I discovered that game was literally life-changing for me. I would not be here. You would not be here.
Big budget games are still plagued by people who make decisions wanting to make movies or prestige TV instead. I think there's something to that. And let's see, I actually don't think the problem is that we have wannabe movie makers, too many of them in the industry. What I think is the problem is that if you're making a game that tells its story, like if you have a cinematic game, like an Uncharted, or a game that just functions like that, where you have gameplay and then you have the cutscenes, and the cutscenes tell all the story, and the characters, they yap at each other while you're playing the game. Like, this is a very... the interactive language there is basically non-existent. The gameplay is just there to fry out your dopamine system while you watch the movie play. The problem is not that we have too many movie people in the industry. The problem is that we have a really good idea of how to tell stories with cinema, and it is very easy to mask your illiteracy in interactive storytelling by just pulling in these cinematic tricks. So you'll have, instead of having something like a Deus Ex or a Chris Crawford game or a Fumido, I mean, look at The Last Guardian. The Last Guardian is the best game of basically the last decade. I don't think there is any game of that caliber. All of that narrative comes through in the interactivity, and that's a really polished example of great interactive storytelling. And, there's cutscenes in there to sort of contextualize things. And, that's fine. But you could basically strip all of that out and you're still building a relationship with Trico. The game still manages to tell the story without that. But it's very hard to make that sort of game if you don't have a good sense for interactive storytelling. So I don't think the problem is we have too many movie people in the industry. I think we just have too many mediocre game designers. And because they're mediocre, they look for forms which it's really easy to mask how mediocre you really are at it. And so they just sort of, it's just sort of a race to how can I hide that I don't know what I'm doing here. And they just immediately jump on to, oh, I'll just make The Last of Us, except this time it's with Vikings. I'm a genius. But let's let Warren Spector talk now.
It's not for a game of Dungeons & Dragons. My dungeon master was cyberpunk guru Bruce Sterling. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him, but he and Bill Gibson kind of started the whole cyberpunk thing. He was a great storyteller. But what made the experience special wasn't the story that Bruce was telling. What made the experience special was that my friends and I were telling the story with him. We had to use our wits and some more or less vague rules to get around and over and through the obstacles that Bruce threw at us. The shape of the story belonged to Bruce. I mean, anybody who's played D&D knows this. But every detail belongs to us, okay? So we all became storytellers that night. And I was completely hooked. I played in a D&D campaign for 10 years. And the ending of that campaign was so dramatic that if I told you about it, you would absolutely make fun of me because I would start crying. It was so powerful. No, it was amazing. I mean, maybe after, if anybody wants to know, I'll tell you. But and then you would abuse me for crying over a D&D campaign. So we're not going to go there. But 10 years playing in that campaign was pretty amazing.
I hope you get to play D&D tabletop at least sometime in my life. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really can be a pain. I think what you really need is you need to have a friend who is a dungeon master and just let them know that you're active, just call me bitch, let me play the game. I want to play.
So what does that have to do with ASX? Just everything. My entire career, this is the pathetic part of the talk, my entire career, 34 years of making games, has been about trying to recreate that feeling I had in 1978 when I played D&D for the first time. That's been my life mission, to recreate that feeling. So to start to bring this around to Deus Ex, I've been playing around with the notion of shared authorship, of that collaboration between developer and player. And immersive simulation, that idea that we can make you really feel like you're in another world. Some friends and I have been talking about that for a very long time and working in that field in games like Underworld and System Shock and Thief and a variety of others.
Oh, Doug Church. So Doug Church directed System Shock 1, and I believe he worked for Valve for the longest time. I think he's still there. I don't remember what he did for Valve. But from memory, it was something completely unimpressive. Like, I don't think he worked on the Portal games. I think he was doing something on, like, the Storefront or some shit like that. And I was like... I recall reading something about what he was doing and being majorly upset. Because this guy, he directed System Shock 1, damn it. It's like when you learn that the greatest horror director of all time, Takayoshi Sato... is currently the animation director over at Nintendo. Like, he's the animation director on the Luigi's Mansion 3. The man who gave us Silent Hill 2 is currently overseeing the animations for Mario Tennis and Luigi's Mansion.
Worked on. Every single one has been about trying to engage all of you, engage players in the telling of the story. My only hope is just to do it a little better every time.
That is cool. Like, look, that's really cool. It's really cool that the father of Silent Hill 2 was working on Luigi's Mansion, but at the same time, this is just a pathetic use of his time and talent. He should obviously be given a studio of, like, you are in charge of this project, and you'll have a studio of 8 like younger sort of apprentices who will work under you, and they'll make the games as you design them for them to make. And then once you've created like a good prototype, we'll bring in a staff of like 30, 50 people and we'll fully realize your vision.
More authorial control with every game. But then there came a point where, what we were doing in Underworld and System Shock wasn't quite enough. And I decided it was time to kind of...
Is that an F for me or an F for Takayoshi Sato?
Swing for the fences. It was a period of time when I was sick to death of making games about guys in plate armor swinging big swords. Okay, I was just tired of that. I'd done enough of it. If I even thought about making another
Frustrado.
game about you being the last space marine between the Earth and alien invasion, I was going to stop making games.
Silent Hill is just the most interesting franchise in the world because the first game was directed by the great Keiichiro Toyama with basically a collection of rejects and losers which Konami didn't like. I think the problem was that Japan's firing law were too strict, so Konami couldn't just get rid of these people, so they just gathered all of the non-conformists and all of their rejects into one team, and they told Toyama, make a game with an American feeling. And then they didn't bother him at all afterwards. And because he was completely left alone, he was able to direct like an amazing game. And then he gets lost. And then like they have to create a sequel to the game. And it's like, well, the animation director of the first game, who he slept in the studio for a year and a half just rendering the cutscenes. And he's the only one in the company who knew how to work with CGI. I guess we'll just listen to him, and he writes basically the entire story of Silent Hill 2. All the crime and punishment stuff, like the story of Harry. He wrote all the dialogue with all the women in the game specifically, which is like half of all the dialogue in the game. And it's like, how well is that gonna go? Oh, it's an amazing game too. Oh, great. Oh, but now he's gone. He's gone too. So now they need to find a new creative director. And they do, with Masahiro Ito and Hiroyuki Owaku, and they make the third game. And it's also amazing. So it's just like, with Koichiro Toyama, you really get that sort of small-town Stephen King vibe of the first game. Then he leaves, and now you get Takeuchi Sato, and he has like this dark, moody, psychological edge to him, and he like brings that into the game, and it works. And then you go into Masahiro Ito and Owaku, and they're much more fans of Jacob's Ladder and David Lynch, and they also want to do like a more sort of intimate story about like a vulnerable young girl, and it's like all of these weird, different creative leads with all these different sensibilities take this license. And it always works, basically until they take it out of Japan.
Okay, as simple as that. And
Maybe increase the speed, otherwise we'll be here for 5 hours. I have nowhere else to go.
I wanted to make a game that I called the real-world role-playing game. I wanted to make a game where you could solve problems the way you wanted. And I wanted your choices during play to make a difference in how the story played out. And here's kind of one of the keys. I wanted your choices to say more about you, the player, the human, with your hands on a keyboard and a mouse or a controller. I wanted the choices to say more about you than they did about your in-game avatar. I don't care about your puppet. I care about you. I wanted every player to get to the end of the game having had a unique experience. In other words, I wanted to tell a story with players just the way Bruce had told a story with me and with my friends.
Okay. I don't believe that... I don't think choice branches are necessary to do that, but I understand that he's trying to go for that whole sort of collaborative storytelling angle.
That was 1994. I was working at Origin, the place where they made the Ultima games. I have no idea.
Was anybody in chat born then?
We were okay. People remember Origin. Good. I should give a whole talk about how special Origin was. Anyway, I came up with an idea that would let me do all the stuff I just talked about, and that was a game called Troubleshooter. It was set in the world of 1995. You played a character called Jake Shooter, ex-CIA, now a hard-boiled private eye.
You were in the army then?
Film noir. And Origin and EA weren't interested at all in a game like Troubleshooter, which became Deus Ex at some point. I'll tell you all about it.
Born in 96.
I couldn't tell you why they weren't interested, but it's probably a good thing because trying to recreate the real world back in 1994 was an insane thing to even think about. And I mean, it's probably still insane today, but it was crazy. But I shelved the idea. Ideas are easy. Anybody who tells you that ideas are hard or you should, hold on to your ideas because they're so amazing and valuable is kind of nutso, right? Ideas are easy. I had plenty of other games I wanted to make. A few years passed, and I left Origin and worked for Looking Glass for a while, where one of the critical projects going on was a game called Thief. And something really critical happened during the Thief development. I played a build. I came to a place that was just too hard for me to sneak. I was failing every time. And I asked the team, just make me tough enough that I can fight my way past these guards because I'm getting killed every time. And they said no.
PC
because if we made the player character strong enough to...
Oof, yeah, like... Oh, it was only a few years ago after I became like a real adult for real. That's a bit more than a few years ago now. I still remember what it felt like when I finally had a laptop or a PC at home which was able to run every game. I was like, oh my god, this is incredible.
Fight, no one would ever sneak. And the idea of the game was to sneak. And they're probably right. For Thief, that was probably the right decision to make. But I made a vow right then that I was going to make a game that let you fight or sneak as you chose. So not long after that, Looking Glass ran out of money. I mean, let's be frank. And so I was out on the street, like panhandling and stuff, and figured I should do a startup. I blew the dust off that old troubleshooter proposal, and amazingly enough, convinced a company I won't name to let me make a role-playing game set in the universe of one of the most successful RTS lines around, and I won't tell you what that was either. And I was about to sign the contract when John Romero called me up and said, "Don't sign that contract. Join me at Ion Storm." And
oh my god, I knew what that company was. Oh my god, what was that? It was I can't remember.
make the game of your dreams. No creative interference.
Was it EA? It may have been EA. It was EA. I remember now. Yeah. Oh, that drip on him is insane. 90s game designers were built different. Let me tell you something. Have you ever seen an image of a young Hideo Kojima? Everybody's seen young Hideki Kamiya, where he's like a cool badass. But I think people are completely blind to just how amazingly handsome Hideo Kojima, a young Hideo Kojima was. Look at that. I'm telling you, game designers, they were built different.
Biggest budget you've ever had, biggest marketing budget you've ever had, and I mean, who says no to that, right? So
he still looks good, but like
Ion Storm
he looked really good.
And this is when Deus Ex really got started. But hold on, okay? I had this idea for a game, the game of my dream.
Ooh, how Destiny 2 transformed Bungie. That might be interesting. Hold on, I'll copy that. Thank you for the suggestion. If anybody out there knows about the good GDC talks, absolutely let me know. I'm always looking for those.
I've done this for every single project I've ever worked on, and I encourage all of you to do something like this before you start on your own projects. I asked myself a series of questions that I call the 6 + 2 + 1. Now, why I don't call it the 9, I don't know, but it's the 6 + 2 + 1. And if the answers to these questions are no or I don't know, I don't make the game. I have to have yes answers. So here are those questions. And this is not genius stuff. It's just something I do. And I didn't even used to tell my teams about it, which was really dumb. But anyway, I'm going to tell you about it. What's the core idea? Can you describe the game in 1, 2, or 3 sentences? It's kind of like the elevator pitch, right? For Deus Ex, the real-world role-playing game where players tell their own stories. That was the one-sentence pitch. So why do this game? Like I said, ideas are easy. I had 1 million of them. I've got 300 game ideas on this hard drive right here on this laptop. You need to choose the one the right idea, okay, from all the ideas you have. Could it be a breakout commercial hit? Could it make everybody a fortune? Could it start a series? Is it something you burn to make? With Deus Ex, I had no choice, okay? I had to make that game or my entire life was going to be a failure. I didn't think about...
You want to see what I've been working on? I've been trying to draw like a face, but it always comes out looking wrong. Here's like a big skull guy. This is what the face... Look at this. This is terrible. It looks so bad.
A commercial or critical success, I was going to find a way to make this game one way or another. So the third is, what are the development challenges? Really hard stuff is fine.
Looks
I
scary.
encourage all of you to tackle really hard problems.
But
impossible stuff is not so good. In Deus Ex, almost everyone thought it was impossible to combine stealth combat and role-playing. I was convinced we could pull all those things off, and I was just going to...
The idea... yeah, hold on. Let me see. Is this the... Yes. The idea is that it's a big old boss, and he's like... You're like the little guy. And the boss, he's like trying to get you. And you're like trying to attack him. It's one of those glorified you attack the boss's hands fights. Which are always interesting. I also have I have a peony. Anyways,
make a team do it. How well-suited games is the idea. We don't do being very well, okay? At least at the time we didn't. Being in love, we don't do that very well.
Classic video giant hand fight.
We don't do that very well.
Yeah.
Games are about doing and about the exploration of spaces, and that's really kind of the heart of Deus Ex. So what's the player fantasy? If the fantasy
A
in the goal line is
peony,
up with
not
that
a
idea-
panini.
In Deus Ex, it was you're a James Bond figure. At least this is where we started. Who's equally good at fighting, sneaking, and charming people, which is a pretty solid fantasy. What does the player do? What are the verbs of the game? Games are about doing, like I said. At some level, if you boil it down, Deus Ex it's about running, jumping, sneaking, talking, fighting, which are all good, solid game verbs. There was nothing innovative about the verbs of the game. They were just good, solid game verbs. And then we get to the 2+1. Has anyone done this before? Okay. If someone has done it before, what can we learn from them? And if no one's done it before,
Has anyone done this kind of a hand boss battle before? I don't think so. I don't think anybody's done that. I think I'd know.
or what does that tell us? It could be a really bad idea, okay? Or it could be so original that it's something that could change the world of gaming. You just don't know, but you need to know if someone's done it.
My
before and
hand
think about
boss
it.
might change
And I
the
knew there
world
had
of
never been a
gaming.
game like Deus Ex. At least I felt that way in my egotistical world of
It's
fantasy.
true, it's true.
And I was going to show everybody that they'd missed the boat. And then what's the one thing? We are a very young medium, even today. I've been saying this for 30-something years, and it's still freaking true. Anybody who believes that we've had our Citizen Kane, or whatever, however you want to think about it, is fooling themselves. We have not done everything games can and should do. And you can always find one thing that hasn't been done before. Even if you're making a My Little Pony game, you can find, actually, okay, we have some bronies in the audience, great. But you can always find one new thing, okay? And in Deus Ex, I thought the combination of genres was going to be unique, would result in something unique. And the
I
idea
would have
that,
walked straight
players
out
could
of
solve
there.
problems the way they wanted to, instead of us as developers, forcing them to play the way we wanted them to. And the +1, this is really important to me. It may or may not be important to you, but do you have something to say? There has to be something more, in my opinion, in a game than what's happening just on the surface level of action, okay? If you don't have something to say, a theme or an issue you want players to explore, you are kind of wasting players' time.
Yeah, so I got into a bit of an argument. I need to stop arguing with people in the comments. I never used to do it, but now I do it all the time. It was on my Demon Souls video, and I had a commenter. I never read essays. If you comment 50 paragraphs, brother, I don't read that. I read the first sentence. And the first sentence he wrote really annoyed me because he said that my take on Demon Souls' combat was ignorant. See, I ignorantly believed that Demon Souls' combat is, it's not there for combat, it's there to set the mood. It's there to create that feeling of dread. And the feeling of dread, that's really the point. And apparently, no. No. I'm completely wrong. The combat is there because of the combat, you see. And the problem is that Demon's Souls' combat isn't as fun as it was in later FromSoft games. Therefore, they got better at the combat. And my notion that, no, actually, the scenario direction, the player direction, the ambience that they were able to generate with the more primitive combat, my appreciation of that was ignorant, because combat cannot be, it cannot be anything more than just the combat. I was reading too much into it. I was just ignorant. Argue aesthetics.
And you are wasting your
That's
time.
me.
I said it. Okay, there you
That's
go.
me.
In Deus Ex, I wanted to explore all sorts of big issues, which I will get to.
Also,
shortly.
the guy. No, I'm just ragging on some poor commenter. Every comment he made had one like, so he was he was replying to me, and he was liking all of his own comments. I was like, wow, I could like my comments and play the same game, but I chose not to. Did Matthew say the same thing?
And I wanted players to explore those things in ways that only games could allow them to do. So luckily, where Deus Ex was concerned, the answers were yes. So we started in the concept phase. The first thing that happened was the real world went away, because even in 1997, it was just not possible to recreate the real world. So we moved it out to 2052. That was one of the first decisions we made. And we had to know what the real world was going to be like 50
But
years
he
in the
bullied
future.
me first.
So that led us in a
It's
couple
okay to
directions.
counter bully.
It led us to cyberpunk fiction, and it led us to movies like Blade Runner. But that can only take us so far. So if we were going to plug into the real cultural zeitgeist, we had to pay close attention to things in the real world. So you didn't have to be a genius, even in 1997, to see that the news was increasingly filled with reports of terrorism. It wasn't a part of our daily lives at that point, but you could kind of see it coming. If you did a little digging, you started seeing military efforts to create mechanically augmented soldiers, and we even found real-world cloaking devices. They're kind of fake and phony, but it was still cool. We could put it in the game because we found that. AI research had people talking about the singularity. They're still talking about that. I'm still thinking about that. I'm working on System Shock 3 now. You'll probably think about it again soon. But the point where computer AI overtook human intelligence was on people's minds back then. And really interesting to us was the rise of nanotechnology. So the dangers of that seemed like it'd be fun to explore. But most important, everywhere you looked in 1997, there was a conspiracy theory. It was crazy. Black helicopters, men in black, manufactured diseases, sentient AIs, government serving the needs of mysterious overlords. I mean, it was all there, right? And the World Wide Web, I mean, who knew where that was going to lead?
Yeah.
People believed in all that
Don't get any
stuff,
ideas, chat.
okay? And the world of Deus Ex was being created all around us. We didn't have to make anything up. It was great. Here are the things I wanted people thinking about. I created some pillar questions, and every decision that we made on the game was filtered through this mesh. I already mentioned this. So what would happen if you mashed up these genres? What would happen if you dropped a James Bond guy who believes in right and wrong and black and white into a world that's all shades of gray? What would the world be like if every conspiracy theory people believe to be true were in fact true? And what did it mean to be human in a world of augmentation, mechanical and nano? And finally, how would the world be better off? This was really important. Would the world be better off as it really is, ruled by a secret cabal, of course? Would it be better off if it was ruled by a sentient AI that connected all of us but cost us our free will? Would it be better off plunged into a new dark age where free will reigned? Okay, or would... Yeah, anyway, I'll stop there. I got too much to talk about. The game would have no bosses to kill. It was going to be about the fate of the world and what you believed it should be. Now, in a novel or a movie, all you get to do is say, I agree, or I disagree. You get to interpret. In a game, I thought, and only in a game, you could answer those questions for yourself through your play choices. That was the power of those questions. So I also created a set of commandments. I encourage you to do this, too, in your games. Your teams will appreciate it, I promise you. These are just the Deus Ex rules of role-playing, basically, right? Your rules may vary. Always show the goal. You should always see what you're trying to accomplish. It's not fun to try to figure out what you have to do. It's fun doing it. You should show the goal. Problems, not puzzles. It's an obstacle course, not a jigsaw puzzle, okay? You should never have to read a designer's mind. No forced failures. Failure is not fun. Getting knocked unconscious and waking up with a smoking gun in your hand and dead bodies may make for a great story, but it has nothing to do... I'm not going to curse. I was going to curse. It has nothing to do with games. Okay.
That's very nice.
Situations where the player has no chance to react in the Deus Ex world are bad.
Ooh, I think, like, see, he's not like for the kind of game he's making there. Like, yeah, but obviously there's exceptions to everything. I feel like I need to disagree with him here, but like, I so want more games to lessen their need for forced failure states and such that I don't really want to. I will say that I think one of the most underutilized elements in video games, this was actually, I first became aware of how underutilized this was back in 2013 or whenever, or 2011 maybe, when I played, 20,000 Feet of Loving or whatever that game was called, where you like peel the orange. Like that spy game, is what I felt was really underutilized was the idea of a cut. You know, you just cut from one section to another one. And I have not seen a lot of development on that front.
I already said this. It's about playing a role, not about rolling dice. We have better simulation tools and techniques than Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson had back in the 70s. Why do we still have character classes and skill levels and die rolls? So we were going to try to do away with that stuff. If something is cool, don't even think about letting an NPC do it. Players do the cool stuff. NPCs watch the player do the cool stuff. You want constant rewards to drive players onward. Okay, you have to reward players regularly. This is genius right here. As the player gets better, make the game harder. Think 3D. I believe that 3D maps can't be laid out on graph paper. You're more than welcome to disagree with me. But if players aren't looking up and down constantly, you might as well make a 2D game.
I mean, Portal. Even in, we navigate in 3D spaces all the time, but we don't really spend a lot of time looking down or up. We're like the reason widescreen TVs became the norm, like that 16 by 9 aspect ratio, is because it almost perfectly fits the human optics. Like your eyes see basically a 16 by 9 sort of circle or oval shape. So there's just a much more heightened emphasis in life on a horizontal viewpoint. So that's just going to come through in video games too. I suppose unless you really, really force yourself to integrate verticality in your games, but even then I think players are just instinctively not going to look for that stuff as much. So I don't believe in fighting
Tunnels
human
that go
nature.
from A to B are not very interesting spaces. Highly interconnected spaces, horizontally and vertically.
But this everything he's saying here, I agree with.
Are what are interesting. Locations that have many entrance and exit points. Are
What did I mean by cuts? I think there's a lot of games that could benefit greatly from cuts, because there's a lot of, there's a game called was it What Remains of Edith Finch, where you're having that daydream, where you're working in a factory and you have you have a knife and I think you're cutting fish, and the gameplay is just about cutting the fish, and you move the fish and then you get another fish and you cut the fish. And while that's happening, your avatar in the game begins to daydream, and you get like a little cloud of a dream that's happening, and you're still cutting the fish, but the cloud becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and like you instinctively get more attracted to that as a player, but you're still also working at the fish, and what inevitably happens is that there's an accident, and I think that's a really great way of utilizing gameplay to sort of tell the story of what is going on there, and make the emotion feel really real. Like everybody has been distracted at work at some point, so everybody can kind of relate to that. And what I don't need afterwards is a scene where I walk and I get the bandage and I wrap the bandage around myself. There's so much busy work and so much like this devotion to the player's. Like, I don't believe in the player having to put down the controller at all times just so that they can watch the movie. But I do think that it is perfectly fine to, like with that dream sequence, that daydream sequence, it's perfectly fine to just present a scenario, and when that scenario has served its purpose, you just cut to the next section, and I don't think you always need, like, to context, like, and not every game needs to be Metal Gear Solid. You don't need to contextualize every single piece of gameplay. Provided you write the story well, you can just do an immediate cut to the next section and players will read it instinctively as, oh, I get how A to B, A goes from B. Like, I get it. Yeah. Too much focus on minutia.
Every problem's going to have multiple solutions. Okay, so I was laying down these filters and commandments, and while that was going on, we did even more conspiracy research. By the way, Google Denver Airport conspiracy if you want to see one that was so wacky we couldn't even put it in the game. We're in concept phase. We homed in on what we wanted the game to look like.
We're out here trying to nuke my channel.
We worked on our backstory. We figured out what was happening in all of these places, the asteroid belt in Africa and Mexico, and all these places you never went in the game, so we could make the places you did visit more believable. We worked out more than 25 missions all around the world. The amount of story we planned was insane. We created over 200 characters before we had a story, also insane. But we figured we could build a story around the characters. Anyway, I don't know what we were thinking.
No, I like that approach.
Are you sitting down? 500 pages of documentation. Yeah, no one read it. Okay, so concept phase. I'm really gonna have to rip through this because I've got another 90 slides to get through.
I like the idea of we're just gonna create this huge world and then we can draw from it when we come to making the game.
So concept phase wrapped up. And we headed into pre-production, and at the time when we figured out what game we were really going to make. We started prototyping, which I will come back to if I have time. We built a team, went from being just 6 people to being about 30. The Deus Ex team was about 30 people. Totally dysfunctional team. We'll get into that a little bit more too. So we
if
had about,
this isn't just
totally from being just 6.
The biggest group of nerds you've ever seen, my God. Why, like, this haircut? I get that it was the 90s, but come on, man. What do you...
6 people to being about 30. The Deus Ex team was about 30 people. Totally dysfunctional team. We'll get into that a little bit more too. So we had about 6-ish months of pre-production, which probably wasn't enough, but it was good enough. It got us by. We cut a bunch of stuff and ended up with 270 pages of documentation, which nobody read, and we entered production. It was a grind, just like every project. I mean, I could spend all day just talking about production.
I love this, where it's like just a regular, boring office scenario. Meanwhile, the Johnny Monster man here in the background is just... it's like, this is a scene from a horror movie. But because we live in this horrible universe, this is just like going to the office.
We saw our goals being realized. There's a lot more to tell. I mean, you don't want to know how many times I was told just make a shooter, and I said no. You don't want to. Well, you probably do want to hear, but anyway, an artist left out the World Trade Center from the New York City skyline, which
My
was
vision
pretty
is
eerie
so
and a totally innocent mistake.
Have you guys seen? You've
and-
probably all seen it. It's the Ice and Jam, I think, YouTube channel. The JC Denton prank phone calls. They are the funniest thing in the world.
And then there was the day we hit pre-alpha and realized the game was not fun. That was a good one. By September 1999, we were done, except we weren't. The game was not good enough. It wasn't ready to ship.
Hold on.
September 1999 was really the first time we saw all of our game systems come together. And immersive sims come together very late.
Hold
All your
on.
little game systems and rules are all working together magically to produce this amazing experience. But if we had shipped then, none of us would be in this room right now. Luckily, IDOS, our publishers, saw the potential
Maybe you
of the
should
game
try
and
getting
gave
a
us
job.
more time.
Yeah.
So by June of 2000, Deus Ex was in fact ready to ship. It was the game of my
My
dreams. It was
my
done.
favorite one is the one where he's just like, hold on, and he's just like, just delaying the scammer forever.
And it was created by an incredibly talented team. Another thing I always do, it's really crazy, but I close my eyes when I'm starting a game and I imagine what it's going to look like. I mean, I literally close my eyes and sit there and imagine. And 3 years later, there it was. Every single detail had changed, every single detail. But in spirit, it was exactly
What
the
does
game
the
I hoped it
screen
would be,
mean? The one with
which
the
was
blue
kind of amazing. The only time
interface.
that's ever happened. But I was terrified. Right before we shipped, I put my head down on my desk and I just said, if people get that you can fight, sneak, or
What a
talk,
shame.
we're going to rule the world. If
Yeah.
people compare our combat to Half-Life, we're dead. If people compare our sneaking to Thief, we're dead. And if people compare our role-playing elements to Baldur's Gate, we're dead. There was just no telling how it was going to go. But there was also nothing anybody could do. We shipped the game, and we'd soon know how people responded, and I'll try to get to that here today. So let me kind of rip through what we did right and wrong. It's ironic because we made a game where there was no right and wrong, and yet plenty went right and wrong in the development, I'll tell you. So what went right?
I tell you
we had a
what.
clear high-level vision. I've already talked a little bit about that. We knew what game we wanted to make, or at least what kind of game we wanted to make. It was a natural outgrowth of games like
What a shame.
from companies like this. We built on a foundation that already existed. As you know, it was a game I'd been thinking about for many years, so it didn't come out of nowhere. We had a good idea of what game we wanted to make. So the lesson here is if there's a game that you have to make, never give up, because someone's going to be stupid enough to give you the money someday. Okay?
That's true. That's
We had very clear goals. Those commandments, they were a great start, but we had to move from abstract ideas to game design specifics. We had to start thinking about what players wanted to do and not what we wanted to do. So what were our goals? We wanted players thinking about who they were in the world. Character differentiation, totally important. Okay? We wanted players to think how they wanted to behave in the world. Okay, we had to wean players from traditional games, puzzle games, and fighting games to games where they actually had to, I don't know what's the word, think. God, I have an attitude. We wanted a game that tuned itself to each player's play style, okay, rather than forcing players to play the way we wanted them to play. We wanted them to feel like they were actually in the world, okay? They needed to be able to apply real-world logic to the problems in the game. And everything in the game had to be based on something real. I'm sure if there's anybody who worked on Deus Ex in this audience, I'm sure you hate me because I made everybody base stuff on real stuff. And could we put players in control of the experience? If not, Deus Ex was going to be a failed experiment.
I would also like to point out that this
PowerPoint
PowerPoint presentation looks like trash.
Okay? But we did okay. We started out with that team of 6 figuring out what game we wanted to make. We started working out our missions, way too many of them. I'll come back to this in a minute. We hammered on our game systems. But here's the thing. I have 2 number 3s. Look at that. I needed more pre-production on this deck. By March of 1998, we thought we knew everything we needed to know to make the game, but man, were we wrong. We were open to change. Be open to change. Anybody who tells you that, when you get to the end of pre-production, you got a script and nothing changes.
I don't mind criticizing their PowerPoint skills because they usually suck. They suck at this. They can't call up Casey and be like, hey, you make a good PowerPoint presentation for me.
Has never made a game, right? And it's usually going to be
They
someone
just
wearing a
need to
suit.
make
They'll
them
let them
better.
know.
What can I tell you?
So why did things change? Well, we had new people join the team. They had new ideas. As we brought on new people, we found ourselves with a team of hardcore
what's
shooter
this?
players, Ultima fans, RTS players. I mean, it was crazy. And it was my job and my leads team's job to kind of manage the conflicts that raged over the kinds of games that all those new people wanted to make. By the way, if whoever made this diagram is in the audience, I'm sorry I stole it. Our game systems didn't work as well in reality as we thought they would on paper, or as I thought they would on paper. Another thing we did right was we always had a playable build. Again, this is like common practice now. We always knew where we were, even if that was painful. Proto missions critical to all of our scheduling and the quality of the final game. The first one we built was a White House mission, which we ended up having to cut, but that mission showed the potential of the game. We hacked in everything that we knew we wanted the player to do. It's totally hacked. And we saw a bunch of stuff that didn't work. That's the power of proto missions, as we called them back then. Our performance was abysmal. We knew we'd have to cut our maps up into smaller chunks. The skill system that I came up with, this is when I got the first inkling that it wasn't actually going to be any fun. I was too stubborn to cut it at that point or change it, but we got a sense that AI was going to be a big challenge for us. And then shortly after that, actually it was almost a year after that, we had some real missions built, and we let real people play the game. You could do everything you were going to do in the game, and it really wasn't hacked. It was as documented, but not hacked. And we let real people come in and play the game. Do not tell your publisher you're doing this. Okay. We needed the opinions of people who understood our kind of game and the development process better than we did. So we had real people come in and play the game. And
there should be a link in the Discord, in the video if you want to play my game, the alpha release of my game.
Listening to their responses, I called that particular milestone the "Wow, these missions suck" milestone. We had a lot of work to do. Okay, we had potential. Everybody saw that, but we had a lot of work to do. So we ended up cutting and cutting and cutting. We had too much game.
Let me know what you think about that.
Harvey Smith, the lead designer, had been telling me stop being a kitchen sink designer and cut stuff. And I'll come back to that too. We licensed tech. That was something we did right. We used Unreal Tournament, and for the most part, it worked out really well. Adding what we needed was much easier than it could have been. Unreal Ed was really powerful, superior to anything else at the time. Unreal Script allowed programmers to do lots of interesting things easily and quickly. That's my entire programming team, plus one of the testers. 3 programmers made Deus Ex. They were very overworked.
What?
But they were able to do it because we licensed stuff. So what went wrong? All sorts of stuff. Team structure did not work.
That's pretty crazy, man.
God, I had 2 people qualified to be lead designers, so instead of picking one, I said, you're both lead designers. I'm going to give you both your own design team.
No.
Don't do that. I thought I could manage the tension between the immersive sim guys and the Ultima guys. And what ended up happening was that I had to call one of the design teams 1 and the other one A, because neither would be B or 2. Yeah.
So, you will not see this advocated for in Harvard Business School. This is actually, there's a name for this. It's called, I think it's called the 2-in-the-box management style. 2-in-the-box management style, 2-in-the-box management style. Yeah, so, this is actually the management style favored by one Adolf Hitler. He would often do this when he gave people assignments, gave 2 people the assignments, and then they'd have to compete to do it better. The problem with this is, number one, it just creates an unnecessary amount of tension to be splitting up authority like this within an organization. It's a really bad idea. It also creates a sort of, you're all working on the same game. Why are you splitting people up into teams to compete? But also, one of the biggest problem with this is that this guy, if he alone is in charge, there's only one way for him to succeed, and that's to make a good game. But when they're both in charge, he can actually succeed by screwing this guy over. And that is a recipe for destroying your project. So never do this. Never, ever, ever do this.
So eventually I had to just say one of you was the lead designer. A couple people left. It was very sad, but it was the right thing for the game. On the art side, we also had problems because the artists at first, for about the first year of the project, actually reported to a guy in Dallas, not to me. And I argued and screamed about matrix management not working, and ultimately I won, and the artists ended up reporting to me. And I can only imagine what the game might have looked like if the artists had reported to me from the start. That would have been interesting. One of the things I probably should have talked about that I did right was I had the right leads team. That's Chris Norton in the middle, Harvey Smith on the left, and Jay Lee on the right. Lead designer, lead programmer, and assistant director, and art director. Those guys do not get enough credit for the creative aspects of the game, the fact that we shipped it all, and managing the team. So give those guys their due.
Claps in chat.
Yeah, people think I make games, they like pour out of my forehead, like I don't know, like I bang my head on the desk and blood pours out or something. So the lesson learned here, have a great leads group, and don't underestimate the importance of team dynamics. Okay. Another thing that went wrong was our goals were too big. We weren't realistic. I mean, if you're going to advance the state of the art, and I hope you will all try to do that, you have to think big. But you really don't want to create missions, which I did, by the way. I have to take responsibility for. You're going to liberate 2,000 people from a concentration camp in the Midwest. Don't do that. Okay. There's going to be a full-on war between the Russo-Mexican Alliance and the United States government in Austin, Texas. Don't do that. Okay. Harvey Smith and another designer, Steve Powers, came to me one day and said, "You cannot make this game. We cannot tell this story." And they browbeat me until I gave in, and we cut a bunch, and the game was better for it. So define your creative box. Define it by according to the limitations of your tech, and also by the limitations of what's right for your game. Okay. The job of the creative director, or the game director on a game, is to define the creative limits, and then make sure the entire team is within it. It is not to say make that pixel blue, not green. Okay. We didn't front load enough of our risks.
Whenever you watch one of these masters at the craft, I think the most valuable lesson they always tell, every single one of them tells it, is that you need to know when to cut shit. You need to know when to say stop. Just say no. You don't need to do. It's okay that you make a game that's just a 9 out of 10. Because you're never going to make a game that's a perfect 10 out of 10. Know what you want to make and just do that. And don't go crazy. Stop adding shit. Stop it.
We did a bunch of prototyping, but we ended up with systems that didn't work.
This is how Kojima goes from making one game every 2 years to now making one game every console, basically.
That was
That's not
created in a vacuum rather than designed to work with all of our game systems and our story. It was a big problem.
It's a common problem with any creative pursuit. Yeah, it's actually true. That's actually true. And a lot of the time when people... Like, this is also just like, it's fine to release something and have it be shit, because you'll just work on something else, and now you know what to do. Like, has anybody here in chat, has anybody gone back and watched my earlier videos? They're terrible. They're absolute trash. and YouTube still recommends a lot of them to people, and I'm like, oh, no, don't do that. You shouldn't watch that. Yeah.
We ended up with some pretty compelling AI, but it was inconsistent, let's just say, in delivery.
Kojima made a tweet the other day saying the only way to advance games is to push things technically. And I feel that's wrong. The best games have been indies over the past decade. Yeah, that's an interesting take from him. I hesitate to disagree with Kojima without knowing what he's talking about. But yeah, I mean... I think also we've just, I've talked about this before, but let me get rid of the night light here. I've talked about this before, but the 5th and 6th generation are the greatest era in video games. There is no question about this. There has never been as concentrated a flow of amazing groundbreaking masterpiece games as there was in the 5th and 6th generation. In the 5th and 6th generation, this was happening because we finally had 3D polygons. And what that meant was you could throw $100 million at a game and it didn't matter. Because if you didn't first solve for the 3D polygon issue, you weren't going to make a good game. And that meant that you actually needed to be good at making games. And so... so there's just like a real concentration on really talented developers. There's also a lot of shit, but there's a lot of talent and a lot of interesting experimentation because people were, trying to work around a new presentation format. But something that happened in the 7th generation is that the 6th generation was the final time where a small team and a big team could both make perfect use of the computer. So Team Eco and Rockstar are both really stretching the PlayStation 2. Like Shadow of the Colossus and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas are really just bleeding the poor PlayStation 2 with its performances. But that dynamic completely breaks down in the 7th generation. And actually, when the 6th generation happened, you can't tell me that San Andreas looks like a more expensive game than Shadow of the Colossus. You can't tell me that because Shadow of the Colossus looks so much better. But Grand Theft Auto 5 is obviously a more expensive game than, insert artistic game, like a Demon's Souls. Because that's a much richer team, a much bigger team, and they are able to make more use out of the machine. And then what has happened is that gap between smaller teams and bigger teams, presentation-wise, has just widened and widened and widened. And we've now, this happened a few years ago, I believe, but we've hit the point now where the gap can't grow any further. And now every single development made in animation, made in modeling engines, made in game engines, made in network codes and such, every single advancement that games are making today, smaller teams benefit much more because you can't really get much more out of a bigger team than we're already getting without just throwing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into it. Whereas, you know, you throw the same amount at a smaller team and you're immediately quadrupling their productive output, which is a really interesting time to be in. And my hope is that I don't think it's this generation. It may be the next generation. We might see the return of the AA studio.
Bring the promise of human behavior. Oh wait, I said this was something we did right. It was also something we did wrong. It took us time to become familiar with the engine, and we never knew it as well as we would have if we built something ourselves. Okay, it took us months of playing with Unreal Tournament before we understood it well enough to work with it. The sim, I mean, Unreal Tournament was not designed to have a deep sim, okay, and allow fighting, sneaking, and talking. We had to layer all that stuff in on top. It worked, but we ended up faking a lot of stuff. Okay, just to be frank.
Define earlier because I went back to watch your Dark Souls 1 and Demons. Oh, no. We're talking way before Kingsfield and way before Demon Souls on my videos. I'm talking, if you guys go back, watch my System Shock 1 video. I think that might illuminate some things, because that video, I was so proud of that video for the longest time, and I rewatched it like some time ago. And I was like, whoa, I thought that was acceptable? That is so weird. Like, I'm using text in the corner to tell you the topic and the subtopic. And it's like, no human being is picking up on, like, this is a really bad way of formatting information. And also I have like a glaring white background at all times. It's really bad. It's really bad. I probably stand by everything I say in those videos, but the formatting, the presentation, it's really choppy stuff. But it sucks. But then you get a bit better at it. And that's kind of like with everything, Just put it out there. And if it sucks, it sucks. And you learn a lesson.
Deus Ex, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on that we didn't.
I doubt AA Studios will make a comeback next gen. The investors have all of their fingers in the development process, unless it's a private company. Yeah, but like, so superhero movies are imploding right now. And Phil Spencer talked about this, that there's a gigantic problem in the industry in just how many games are franchises and sequels to licenses made 10 years ago. You watch stuff like the Callisto Protocol. It bombed. I was telling you, when I first saw that trailer, like I was interested in it for a little bit, but then I saw, oh my god, it's a super like uninteractive, cinema bloated, cutscene game, and I immediately lost steam. I think it was a Summer Game Fest when they announced that. You can see my reaction just die the moment I realized what kind of game it is, and that game cost a shit ton of money and it flopped. And every experiment these people make into trying to get into the games industry, because it is so expensive to make like a blockbuster game, they're all going to flop. The only other option you have is to start financing smaller stuff. There is no more competing at like the AAA blockbuster games. This is the Rockstar economy now. Only the rock stars are able to break even, and it's getting harder and harder to be a rock star because the games are costing so much more money. And it is as simple as we're just going to scale the budgets back, way back. It's that simple. And if you can just do that, then all of a sudden the issues in the industry really fix themselves. I also wouldn't rule out we get like a Steve Jobs eccentric who comes in there. So Steve Jobs is the father of Pixar, right? He buys Pixar from George Lucas, and he just throws money at this. Pixar just burns money every year, and he keeps throwing money at it because he believes I can foster this into something that works. And then he personally negotiates. I think he was negotiating with Will Eisner to make a bunch of Disney movies. And like he took care of the sale of Pixar to Disney, and like Ed Catmull's Creativity Inc., it's a book he wrote, talks really about how valuable Steve Jobs was to Pixar. And one guy like that, somebody who's like, I don't know anything about video games, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a game studio, and I'm going to hire Warren Spector, or I'm going to hire like Fumito Ueda, or I'm going to hire just some genius game designer to run the studio, and he's going to burn money, but he's also going to create amazing games. And this is eventually going to pay off. That's all we need. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Hey, Thoreau.
Didn't actually want. We wanted to be more real in our simulation-driven game.
I was thinking the other day about how id Software could make a killer boomer shooter in a pretty short amount of time that would sell really well. Yeah, probably. I also think that, you know, the indie scene, the AAA market is not adequately capturing the immense value there, because it used to be that Hideo Kojima was the only game director. You know, that's not true. You had Miyamoto, you had Ueda, there's a ton of game directors. But now there's literally 1,000 game designers who are just as knowledgeable about the inner workings of how to tell stories with interactivity as Kojima is. And Phil Spencer, you know, and Jim Ryan, may he rest in hell. These men have now thrown billions of dollars into acquisitions to try to fortify their position in the industry. Again, one CEO of one of these big publishers deciding, you know what, I'm going to take $100 million and I'm going to finance some indie developers. I'm going to pay $1 million. I'm going to finance 100 indie developers to make amazing games exclusive for us. And I'm going to pay them $1 million each. And every single one of these developers is going to take that offer because $1 million sets you really up, and then you can just make games for the rest of your life. It's one for them, and then you write your own check after that. That might be interesting. And it would that would also have a much higher return on profit than throwing $80 billion or whatever it was into Activision. Ridiculous. Long term, because if you look at Apple under Steve Jobs, that's a company that's like acquiring a lot of good faith. If you look at Apple under Tim Cook, it is a company that is running on steam. There is nothing new happening there. It's a dead company, and they're just sort of soaking up rents from the victories Steve Jobs won for them. And that's the same with a lot of these franchises. Like, how many blockbusters does Bethesda Studios have left in them? Because Starfield, critically, completely unimpressive. Nobody cares about this game. And every single time, it's going to be harder and harder to bring in new people, because the hardcore base that gets everybody else excited, they're gone. And the idea of, I'm going to buy a Bethesda game at launch, this is becoming so ingrained into people, and just people aren't, like, it takes a while. Like, it's a lagging indicator, but when you begin to just sort of rot and stagnate like a lot of these companies are, there's probably billions of dollars these companies have yet to make before they begin to just collapse in on themselves, but it is going to happen. Like everybody said, Marvel, it's dead, but it did eventually die. These movies are flopping. And Bethesda Studios, they're not going to get away with just endlessly making these completely buggy, unimpressive, role-playing, light games in an industry that is so far advanced from anything that they are able to put out. I'm trying to even think what companies I would buy games at launch. FromSoft, Supergiant, Mobius, I think that's it. I would buy it from Gen Design. That's Fumito Ueda's new studio. He's actually, I think he teamed up with Epic to make his next game. Kojima Productions. I didn't love Death Stranding. I'm not super excited with Death Stranding 2, but I do want to play it because at least, Death Stranding, it was a take. Kojima did not play it safe with that game. Is it Bokeh? Are they the studio making Toyama's Splitterhead game? That's interesting to me, but I'm really scared that that's gonna be like a multiplayer, live service game. But they actually recently posted an image by Junji Ito, and the idea of the father of Silent Hill creating a game with Junji Ito, a horror game with Junji Ito's hands. It's like, okay, I can play with that. I can play with that. But yeah, it's also like Insomniac, amazing studio, and now they just like, we're gonna just make Spider-Man games. Now we're gonna make the Wolverine game. It's like, oh my god. Okay, great. I couldn't care less about any of these games. And Naughty Dog, you know, Last of Us 2, I think it's completely unimpressive. A lot of people like it, but whatever you think of that game, it destroyed the studio. Like, a lot of the goodwill that studio had was completely thrown in the trash to get that game out there. And a lot of the talent that studio had also left. There was a mass exodus out of Naughty Dog. Neil Druckmann wrecked that studio. And that, like, we don't really know what the cumulative damage of The Last of Us 2 had on that studio. And we won't know until they make their next game. Which I'm not super looking forwards to, because again, all of these companies, they all have a house style, and it's all the same style. But stuff like Fumito Ueda, stuff like Hidetaka Miyazaki, stuff like Kojima, they actually make games with a unique flavor. And hey, I want to see that. Anyways.
We wanted big outdoor areas. The tech was not up to it. We had to break things up into smaller areas, which actually did hurt the game some.
They're still trying to release the multiplayer Last of Us game. Yeah, I mean, it's like, why? Who cares? Like, nobody... Like, is anybody excited for that? It's like Ubisoft making that Skull and Bones game. It's like, who cares at this point?
And
what do you think of Sucker Punch and Ghost of Tsushima? I didn't play Ghost of Tsushima just because, again, it looked like every other game that is being made. It looked like Horizon Zero Dawn. It looked like The Last of Us. It just, you know, it's just like, okay, sort of cinematic, you know, highly acted game. I'm not interested. What is the hook? What is the hook here? And it's just, I couldn't find any reason to get really interested in it. As for the studio themselves, I didn't really love them in the PlayStation 2 days because Sly Cooper 1 felt way too primitive by the time it came out. It felt like just, you know, it felt like Crash Bandicoot 4, if Crash Bandicoot 4 decided to be a stealth game, because it's a very sort of linear, you go straight shot through the tunnel, but it just has more interesting AI going on, and it's like the integration of stealth. It's an interesting game, and I like it, but it's really primitive when Insomniac is making Ratchet and Clank and Naughty Dog made Jak and Daxter, the precursor's Legacy. So immediately they don't super impress me then. I don't think Sly Cooper 2 is great either. I think that it really failed to me because the interesting stuff was traveling around in Paris and stealing and looting and stuff. But instead, the game was to be this sort of mission-based, team heist-a-thon, which is like, you know, you have a really interesting game in the open-world theft thing. And if you could just integrate a way to create your own heists within that, you have something. But they didn't. And then Sly Cooper 3... I mean, I just, you know, I already didn't like that we had a gigantic team in the last game, and they just bloat the team out even more. And I don't like playing as any of these people. I only like playing as Sly. And then the Infamous games, they were like, there's fun to be had in them, but I think they're very generic. So I'm not super jazzed about them as a studio, and I really never have been. I think they've always been surrounded by much more talented people, and I don't think any game they've ever made has... I think there's a lot of good stuff in a lot of the games they make, but it baffles me how they never seem to stop and think, should the game we make just be the good stuff? And let's take all of this crap out. Anyways.
I don't remember what I was going to say here. Okay. I guess for the most part, using licensed tech is a good thing because I've used licensed tech on every project I've done since, and it was a mixed blessing. That's, I guess, the bottom line. We also realized, I've already talked about this, so I'm going to zip through this, but Deus Ex just became less realistic as time went on because it was a mistake to try to recreate the real world in 1997. Maybe today you could do it, but we had no way of living up to people's expectations. This is the interior of the Statue of Liberty. It looks nothing like the Statue of Liberty. Okay. That's not what the statue looks like. I've been there. Population density and object density, we could not come close to recreating the real world. We couldn't make people behave like people. We couldn't simulate a freaking telephone, okay, in ways that people would believe. So the game became less and less realistic as time went on. And then there was the stuff that was out of our control. Ironstorm was not a quiet company. I don't know how many of you remember this. At least the Dallas office screamed a lot. There were ads like this. That was the company motto. Our emails got leaked and printed in the newspaper, including my salary negotiations. That's true.
Yeah.
Playboy shoots happened in the office. We had elaborate ship parties before games shipped. It was it was good. But let me be clear. Two things. First of all, Ion Austin was an oasis of calm. And second, John Romero is one of the greatest people in the game business, okay? He lived up to every promise he made to me, and he loves games more than anybody in this room. So I don't want anybody thinking I'm dissing on John Romero, all right? But all that stuff had an effect on the Austin team. I mean, it's hard to be focused and productive when everybody is screaming negative things about your company. So finally, I'm a little over time. Too bad. I'm not good with schedules. So how did people respond? I said I was going to get back to that. Did we get killed or did we rule the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think Daikatana just was too ambitious. Do you think a new video game crash is imminent? I am hoping if it happens, it will release good talent to make good games again, or the industry too big? Is the industry too big to fail? Nothing is too big to fail, but you should not be optimistic from the prospects of a crash, because a crash is not the scattering from Dune, where all this talent just splinters into the world and all of a sudden we have these little lights of reason and beauty and artistic expression. A new video game crash is tens of thousands of people lose their jobs, a lot of software disappears, a lot of the supply chain just stops completely, and it takes a decade to really get the industry back on track. That would be it would be better that things stay the way they are than for things to crash, because there is no promise that what survives after the crash is going to be even remotely what you want. I don't think it's imminent. I mean, hypothetically, things can just continue to sort of stall and stagnate and be mediocre forever. I think a realignment is a lot more likely than a crash, because the industry, the video game industry is not going to crash. There is way too much money and too much love in the market for this. So, no, people always talk about, video games make more than movies and music combined. It's the biggest entertainment industry. But it's okay, let's cut mobile games out of that equation. And what you see is that video games are they're big. But you, take mobile out and it's 30% of the industry. But that's not nothing. And, it's probably a $50 billion industry if we take out the mobile shit. And that's not nothing. And there's something to be said about, how that, there's something to be said about that in and of itself. So there's always going to be a video game industry in some capacity, unless we have a huge crash that really ruins everything. I think it's just a realignment thing where EA maybe goes, hey, or EA, EA, they lost the FIFA license, so now they're doing EA Sports FC. And it's I know guys who buy every FIFA game. I don't know if any one of them knows that FIFA lost the license. And it's just these companies they've built their entire business model on these really flimsy premises of these licenses. We can just continue to milk annual releases after annual releases, and we'll just keep doing this, and we'll keep printing money. And it's no. Once you alienate your core, you kind of just you can set your watch, because things are it's gonna die. Don't worry, it's gonna die. It's the same with Marvel. The moment they stop making good Marvel movies, the movies die. And these companies are going to die. Bethesda Studios, they're not going to survive forever. They may, the next 4 games they make might make billions of dollars. But unless they actually start making good games, nobody is gonna care. Who gets excited by a Bethesda game anymore? Not me. Not me. But a realignment, I think, is much more reasonable, where something like Rockstar, they're like, yeah, we're going to keep making $300 million games because our games are just going to make $1 billion. And you know what? They make $1 billion. So, that's fine. But Insomniac, like, probably they should, like, yeah, they have Spider-Man, and that's a name, and Spider-Man can sell. But, like, if you're, like, maybe the next Naughty Dog game should be $30 million game, and the studio that makes it should consist of 30 people. I think maybe that's reasonable,
Okay.
I'm going to watch Realms Deep tomorrow.
And we
I don't know what that is.
Do
I know what that is?
But we were surprised by a lot of what players did. Even seasoned gamers were paralyzed by choice. It was strange. When they would get to a choice point early on in our testing, and I would see gamers push the keyboard away and like go, wait, I have to make a real choice? Games had trained
big
people
boomer
not to
shooter
think.
E3? Ooh.
And
maybe. I'm not a big
boomer
shooter guy, but it might be interesting to watch. I'll check it out.
Just play that way. But that's not what happened.
So would smaller scale projects benefit then? Yeah, but there's like, I think we can get sort of lost in the AAA scene because, like, the indie apocalypse happened, but the indie market isn't dead. And, like, if you have, so my friend Lilith, who made the Bloodborne remake, whom I'm gonna have in a discussion video in the not too distant future, probably has enough goodwill that anything put out might just make money. Like, obviously you can't license Bloodborne or Bloodborne Kart, but if Lilith makes her own game, then it's probably gonna make money because Lilith has some goodwill. And if Kira, who made Lunacid, I mean, he's probably not rolling in cash, but he's also probably, Lunacid did not flop. I don't think he gets nothing from the game. So it may also just be that a new kind of industry of, I'm gonna buy what this guy makes because I like him and I like his games, and maybe, he puts out a game every 1 year, every 2 years, and that game makes $150,000 or maybe $200,000 just from a dedicated fan base. And you know what? That's actually really sustainable. And you can do that across the entire aisle, and you can have much more niche games with a lot more, like, because you have a more dedicated audience. I think that might just become more and more real, where the idea of I'm just gonna make games, and I make a game every year, and that's how I pay my bills. That's, if that becomes a real career path, then why would anybody who's passionate about game design sign up to work for Naughty Dog, where they can be squeezed out and destroyed so that Neil Druckmann can make another shitty cutscene bloated trash fest? I don't know. But I think that's like the best case scenario. And I think that's also just really likely. I think that is more and more just becoming the reality of how the industry works.
Instead, was players would get to a choice point.
You love Deus Ex. You're going to love.
Try something different. Go back to the save game.
Everybody's going to love rewatching this stream.
It was very frustrating.
And it's going to try to capture the little moments where we actually talk about Deus Ex.
Once people buy your game, it's their game, so you can't be too upset about that. But we did discover that players could interact with our simulation, as shallow as it was in a lot of ways, and do things that we didn't expect.
But that's not really the purview of this stream. These streams is not just so much to talk about the things they talk about here. It's like, this is just sort of a blueprint, and then we can take massive detours into any topic. It's just for us to hang out,
Everybody knows the lamb ladder story, right? I mean, people would take a light attack munition, put it on a wall, jump on it, put another one higher up, jump on it, put another one higher up, jump on it, and they could get out of the world. So if you go do this in Deus Ex, on a lot of maps you'll find ladders and crates outside of the map, so you can actually stack them up and get back in the game world. Yeah. There was a time about a year after we shipped, I saw somebody in a place I had played myself 100 times and watched people play 1,000 times. And there was a guard standing there in front of an open doorway with laser triggers that would set off an alarm, and 2 guys on patrols on the other side of the door. It was 3 problems, okay? And I watched this one guy sneaking around, moving explosive barrels around. He took 1 shot with the pistol and solved all 3 problems at once. And I fell on the floor. And I guarantee you, no one else in the world had ever done that before. Okay, that was cool. Okay, seeing people actually doing things that were not anticipated was cool and was one of our measures of success. By the way, know how you are going to define success in any game you make. If you can't define success, you are not ready to make that game. Okay, so conversation was.
If the indie market could get out of just making 2D games, it would see a large increase in market share. Yeah, I mean, I think that's also going to become more and more real as the tools become easier to work with. My next game after Snail is going to be a PSX style game.
My definition of success. There was, okay, wasn't it cool? I would hear someone say, when you rescued that prisoner from the cells under UNATCO headquarters, and someone else would say, what cells? That was a win, okay? I used to say all the time, I love the pistol, and the team wanted to cut the pistol because it was the weakest weapon in the game. And it's like, no, don't cut the pistol. I love it. It makes me think. It's my favorite weapon. There was another time. I was at an event like this, actually, and after the talk, I went out. I never do this. I went out for drinks with some people in the audience. Do not ask me. I won't do it. But an inebriated fan sat down next to me and said, how can you make that right-wing piece of trash? And before I could answer, I don't do a good drunk imitation. And then another drunk fan sat down on the other side and said, what do you mean right-wing piece of trash? It was left-wing propaganda from the start. And the cool thing was they were both right, okay, based on how they had played the game and the end games that they had selected and everything. And I just got up and let them to argue.
I'm sweating awesome. Furiously over here.
So instead of talking about how to kill the final boss or save the princess, they talked about the fate of the world. That was success, okay? That was exactly what I wanted them doing. So that was what Deus Ex was all about. It wasn't about what the development team thought the world should be. It was about what you, not your avatar, not the character, what you thought the world should be. So like Bruce Sterling.
Look. You're right. There's plenty of 3D indie games out there. You can guess as to why you don't hear anything about them. Yeah, like most 3D indie games are kind of trash. Let's be real here. But most 2D indie games used to be trash. You guys remember what life was like 12 years ago? Like going on Steam, you bought To the Moon, and you played the game, and you were like, this is terrible. Remember when people thought Braid was like a great artistic expression of the medium? It's because it's like, oh my god, it's a really deep philosophical game because, you're saving the princess, but she doesn't want to be saved, and maybe you're the bad guy. It's like, oh my god, I look back and I'm like, baby steps.
Master, we provided the skeleton of the experience, and players put the meat on the bones. Okay, there was one guy. Okay, I was at GDC. This was several years ago. And a guy came up and dressed as Jason.
Jesus, my nose so stuffy.
And he was German, and I will not try and do a German accent. But he said, I've played through Deus Ex 63 times, and had a different experience every time. And I pushed him on it, and I said, it's not. And he said, no, I played through it 63 times. And then he said words that were magic to my ears. I am going back to Germany after this show. And I was grateful because I really don't want to be on the same continent with that guy. So in the end, Deus Ex was, as all cyberpunk.
But what did I say? What did I say last time we did one of these streams? It's these damn Germans that hawk up all of the convention times.
Fiction is about you and me in the future as it might be. No aliens, no teleporters, no demons, just people in politics and business and stuff that's usually beyond our control. But in the game world, you can actually make a difference and remake the world in your image. That was what Deus Ex was about. It was a powerful idea, at least to me, and I think it's at least in part responsible for the fact that all of you are here today. So that's the really quick version of a very long talk. But here's my final thought for all of you. I sincerely hope that every one of you gets an opportunity to work on the game of your dreams someday. Okay, it's amazing. And I also hope that every one of you gets to work on something that is still relevant 17 years after you make it, and that has a life of its own beyond you. People ask me all the time how I feel about the new Deus Ex games, and all I can tell them is it's amazing. It's amazing because it has a life beyond me, it has a life beyond my team. It's bigger than we were, okay? And I get to play Deus Ex games where I don't know all the secrets. So thanks for listening. That's what I got.
Oh my god.
And thanks.
Do we want to bombard him with... Now, why would he give us his email here? This must be a trap. This is a trap. Aesir, do you know the song Many Souls to Use? I think it's Maiden in Black theme, but it sounds different, more electronic. Oh, yeah, I know exactly what song you're talking about. You're talking about, it's from Kingsfield 4. It's called Dark Reality. Hold on, I'm gonna play it for you. You tell me if this is the song you mean. Can you hear? Is this it? Is this it? Yeah, this is it. Dark Reality, Kingsfield 4. I believe I was one of the first Souls peoples to use it. I used it before Sully did.
And thanks to the GDC folks for letting me go 8 minutes.
Also, the reason I knew you were talking about Dark Reality is because whenever people ask, "Hey, what's that song?" It's always Dark Reality.
Fill out your questionnaires or whatever those things are online, and if you have questions or something, we ran out of time and then some, and I can stay out in the hallway or go somewhere if you want to ask some questions for a little while.
All right, here come the Germans. Here come the Germans.
What's that? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. What time is it? Dude, why did I rush through this? I totally rushed through the last half of this thing. Okay, any questions? No question. Oh wait, we have a question. Say your name and who you are.
My name is Mitchell Sabag, and I recently presented a postgraduate narrative summit on Thief the Dark Project. So I found that talk of yours to be incredibly insightful and fetching.
Okay, he doesn't sound German, this one, but they often are.
Now, with regards to how you were faced with limitations with regards to your...
Oh my god, chat. YouTube just put up a notification on my stream. Focus on your live stream and let YouTube insert ads for you. I can turn this on or I can dismiss it. They are desperate to show you ads, and I'm not gonna let them. Because last time I did that, Nintendo claimed the stream.
Your design and how you had to essentially craft your game through subtraction. How did you approach the idea? How did you approach that, like designing?
How's the Snail project going? I played very early version and I thought it was brilliant. Thank you. Well, how's it going? I mean, here it is. This is also something. Let's get rid of this. Oh my god, I crashed everything. Well, you get the idea, right? It's like chugging along. I've created all of the maps. I have configured the walls for most of them. The enemy AI has been created. I need to work on some of the scenarios I still need to script out, and the main sort of narrative I need to script, but hopefully I'll be able to just finish it now, because I'm not planning on coming back to YouTube before the game is done. We're that close to completion. Here's a little house. Obviously, like, these ugly doors wouldn't be there. They're just for me to see where I have door objects.
These small maps are...
I should put that first part as the intro, the one where the hand stands around. No. This is the intro. This is the intro section. You come here, you walk down, you go into this town, do your thingies, go to the beach. Gonna be a real fun time, I promise you. I'm telling you.
Around the various player personalities like explorers, adventurers, killers, etc. And how did this...
Will it be available on Switch? Last time I checked, the Switch dev kit costs about $5,000, and I think the application process to Nintendo is like $200 or something like that. If it makes... Because, like, I have absolutely zero idea about sales metrics or anything. This could be a game that I just release and, like, 100 of you, 200 of you play it. This might be something that 10,000 people play. I really don't know. I'm not going to put it on Switch unless I can see the sales justifying it, because like if it was just like $1,000, I might pay for that out of pocket, because it would be just a really cool thing to have like my game on a console. But it is a bit too expensive to justify it if I don't see the sales coming through.
Come about given the limitations and coordination between the various teams?
Well, realistically, like I said, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors going on in Deus Ex. Like I said.
Okay, yeah, this is a really, actually, for the first time in this stream, let's talk about Deus Ex for a second. There's a lot of smoke and mirror stuff. A lot of these sort of emergent behaviors that you believe came about organically, a lot of them were hard-coded to happen.
Said our simulation was just deep enough that players to this day actually still find solutions to problems that we didn't plan. But the team, the design team, and I feel bad for those guys even now, because every map had, or every problem and challenge had a sneaky path and a combat path and a sort of a character interaction path. So that was, we had to make sure that there was a way to play through it for every play style, and then we counted on players finding other solutions beyond that. Okay, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that was we just pre-planned some paths.
Probably didn't know that. Yeah.
No, I think that perfectly explains
But
it.
I also think the Switch, I believe the Switch is the cheapest console to get your game on. Get your game on. So, maybe.
And,
good.
thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
Hi.
Oh wait, let me go over to the other side. Okay, name and who you are.
Hi, my name's Amir Rajan. I'm actually an indie game developer. I'm lucky enough to be able to do this full time. And
This guy's what I'm talking about. He does it full time. But where are the Germans? What does Steam charge? Steam charges, I believe, 30%.
you mentioned that your games need to have some sort of message, or you want to say something through your games. Could you expand on that a little bit, primarily from the perspective of maybe a large swath of genres of games? Some of them are super casual versus midcore versus.
I think it's kind of ridiculous. I think that, and this is like, obviously I would think this, but I think it would be really cool if Steam and Nintendo and the gang were like, hey, first $100,000, we're not going to charge you anything. Like, if you paid to be on the platform, we're not going to eat into your profits until you've gotten a sizable enough, chunk of it that we can justify it. But, like, obviously that's a really bad idea, because most projects there don't make a lot of money. I think the average earning of a game on Steam is like $36,000. I think that's what the average game makes. And that number is really inflated by like AAA games making hundreds of millions of dollars, but also shovelware games making $3. So, and it's like, obviously the ratio there is you have $100 million game and you have 5,000 $1 games. So it's a really skewed number. I think somebody corrected it and found out that the median was something like $50,000. So it's like, they just, I guess the average of like a real game doesn't make enough money that Steam could justifiably move to that, move to the other payment system. But I don't know. I'd like them to take less. But Germany, the Germans will be on his airplane. Yeah, man. There's always Germans in these damn conventions. Would GOG be a good platform? I haven't checked out GOG. I have it on itch. Itch is the best platform because they just let me keep all of my money. Or I think it's like 95 or 90-something% of my money, if not all of it. I think it may be all of it. It's really good. I like Itch. Also, Itch, what I love most about Itch is that the storefront is really creator front-loaded. So it's not... like the real commodity there when you're browsing games is the developers and the good name they have. And I think putting the creatives front and center is really integral. Wo die Deutschen. GOG would be perfect. I appreciate all the marketing help here. I haven't done a lot of extensive research into this. I'm still just finishing the game. I can't make any promises any one way or another.
What does it
But
mean
I
to see
appreciate
something when it's
the
not
excitement.
wilderness?
Yeah, okay. I think I perhaps overstated to make my point. I mean,
I agree with you. Don't
I'm obsessing right now about a game called 100 with an exclamation point after it. It doesn't need a message, okay? But
Good
a
stuff.
game
You
that,
have
that
skills and
has a
good creative
narrative,
direction. You will succeed. Thank you.
or even
Thank
one
you.
that has. I'm trying not to name names. You know, I mean,
I was when I released Snail. What I was happiest to hear was that people loved the Academy section. Everybody who talked to me said that their favorite section was the Academy section. And it was like, yes, I can make good horror games. Not everyone can, but apparently I have the touch.
it's so tempting. But any game that has any kind of narrative, however deep,
Aesir,
can actually
Miyazaki
ask
from
players to think
Iceland.
about something. In Epic Mickey, for example, I doubt anybody even knows this, at least consciously, but for me the game was about how important are family and friends to you. Not family and friends are important. In a movie or a book, the theme, which you don't want players thinking, or I mean readers thinking about your theme, you want them kind of ingesting it subconsciously. And in a game, it's kind of the same thing. You want them ingesting it subconsciously. But
Can't wait to play it.
games
Just
ask
bought it.
questions.
Yeah.
Movies-
Also, if you, I haven't worked it out on its right now, but it shouldn't be a problem. If you buy the alpha, obviously you get the full release game when that's ready too. Don't worry. I'll have to sift through some emails and sales records to send out new keys and such, but it'll all update. Don't worry. Don't you worry.
and books and opera, and they make statements. Family and friends are important is very different than how important are family and friends to you.
Also, before you
and-
play it, it's a one and done kind of deal. There is no. I developed the game to be like 40 minutes long. It was supposed to be beaten one sitting, but people apparently clock in at like 3 hours. I completely misunderstood. I misunderestimated how long it took to beat the game. And if I'd have known it took that long, I would have launched it with save files so that people could put it down. But you can't. It's like a 2 or 3 hour game. Or it could be an hour. It depends on how fast you can just go through it.
And is it better to be more powerful and alone, or less powerful with friends who will help you? Okay. What does it mean to be forgotten and rejected? How does that feel? So even a Mickey Mouse game can ask questions like that. And if you think about it in terms of questions, and then create game systems and gameplay that allow players to explore those questions in subtle, subconscious
I love how
ways,
Warren Spector,
I
he's
think
brought
games
out
can
here to
actually
talk about
be,
Deus Ex.
an even more
But
remarkable
you
medium
can
than we
see
are.
he really just wants to talk about Mickey Mouse.
Hi, my name's Pete. My voice is a little broken because GDC. So I have a two-part question. The first part is something that's bothered me for 17 years.
Oh, God.
What does JC stand for?
It stands for Jesus Christ.
It does stand for Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah, but there's more to the story than that. Hold on. Okay.
go for it.
One of my best friends is a wonderful writer named Bradley Denton, who you should all go read. He wrote a book called Blackburn, which you should all read. And if you want to know about me and my friends, he wrote a book called Lunatics, which you should all read, and then you can try and guess who I am. Anyway, he is one of the nicest humans on the planet. And I call him helpful guy, because if you ever need any help with anything, he is there for you. And he's so helpful it gets annoying sometimes. So back then I would often find
What's that Half-Life mod? Horror, free download, made downloads. I just remembered Cry of Fear. Did he make any money? Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if he made money from that, but hopefully.
myself saying, Jesus Christ, Denton.
That was in the era of like PewDiePie plays a game and 1 million people buy it. So you'd hope so.
You know, Jesus Christ, Denton, don't be so helpful. And so when it came time to name the character, it was J.C. Denton.
Oh, that's interesting. So I had a two-part question, if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll make it quick.
Obviously, the internet went crazy over this sort of conspiracy theory that it was Jesus Christ because of what he represented, and obviously no one knew that story, I guess.
I'm not sure I've ever told that story.
Did you find that a lot of people came out of the woodwork because it's a conspiracy theory-centric game? What was the craziest conspiracy theory around the game development that you've ever heard?
Wow. I'm not actually sure. I don't have an answer for that. I'm
No
sorry.
worries. It was a good question. Thank you.
Good day, my name's Marvin. I'm a design developer. Huge fan of Deus Ex, or Deus Ex, as I called it
Well,
in high school, probably.
Deus Ex.
Actually, I thought that was funny. I called it Deus Ex because, you know, it's God from the machine, right? I
Yeah.
thought sentient AI, that would be fun and say something about the game. And
My
I
mum
thought
always didn't buy it for me because of the name.
a lot of people didn't buy it because of the name. I thought it'd be funny if people mispronounced it and said Deus Ex. I got sex in the name.
Just wondering, are there any games, like modern or classic, that you really feel capture like the the vibe, I guess, of Deus Ex.
Oh yeah, one of the things that's been most gratifying is I'm not going to name names here either, but okay, everybody in this room is going to hate me, and I say this. Part of my secret goal with Deus Ex was to shame other developers so they could never make the kinds of games they made again, and it didn't work. But I was really gratified. Lots of developers and lots of people from other studios, talked to me at conferences like this one and said that they changed the way they thought about the games they were making as a result of having played Deus Ex, and a couple of them completely redesigned their games after they played it, which was probably foolish.
Yes, that was foolish. Every now and then you get a game that does everything new and changes everything and blows your mind on what the conceptual scope of video games can be and yada yada yada. Don't change your game mid-development, please. I'm begging you. Just release it, and then your next game can be informed by Deus Ex or whatever.
Having influence is great, and now I see more and more games that were influenced by games like Underworld and System Shock and Thief and Deus Ex and that whole lineage. Right now, clearly the Dishonored games are the ones that capture that spirit the best. It's like half the guys who work on Dishonored, were on my old team, and I can't wait for Prey because those are all my old guys, who I'd want to hire back to work on System Shock 3, but I can't. They're all happy, I hate it. Yeah.
Cool. I do like that though. That it's kind of like how after Team Silent was shut down. Do you guys know what happened to Team Silent when Konami shut down Team Silent? Basically, they all started working for Kojima. And now a lot of the team still works for him at his solo studio. And it's like, oh, happy endings, I guess.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Spector. Thanks for coming out.
That's Warren. I don't answer to Mr. Spector.
Warren, my name is Keith. Thanks for the presentation. Thank you. Thank John Romero, and thank your team for making Deus Ex. It's a huge inspiration on me. I have a bit of a loaded question for you.
I really hope they make a new Deus Ex that goes back to its contemporary conspiratorial roots. Yeah, I think that's more interesting than what the I feel like when they did the new ones, the not Eidos, oh my god, I can't remember the name of the developers right now. The Human Revolution, Mankind Divided games. Their stories and their worlds felt very generic and very just sort of, this could be anything. I have no reason to think this is Deus Ex. Sounds too political. That could be a problem. People attaching meaning to it and people getting upset at things. But I don't know. I feel like one of the cool things about Deus Ex is that you could just play it now, and you don't really feel like this game's informed by any deeply rooted politics of the people who made the game. And I think that if you just approach it with that attitude of, we're just going to explore these conspiracy theories as if they're true, then I think it will be fine. I think people vastly overestimate just how important... not important. I think people vastly overestimate how much people actually care about this sort of stuff. I feel Black Ops 1 and 2 felt more in line with the original Deus Ex than its sequels, if that made any sense. I haven't played those. Are the Black Ops games good? Because I hear there are some good Call of Duty games, strangely enough. Eidos Montreal. It was Eidos Montreal. Thank you guys. Thank you. I don't think the original Deus Ex could be made today without controversy. Like, I think that you would have some people who probably would, I think you would just have this sort of engine of being loud about this sort of stuff probably would get going, but, just tune it out. Nobody cares. No one cares. Come on. If the game is good, the game is good. What matters? Oh yeah, that's right. The Cry of Fear, that was just a kid. That's right. Hopefully he made bank.
Putting you on the spot.
Black Ops 1 and 2 had great campaigns.
Since its initial release in 2000, I've always wanted to play this game in VR. And if the source code of this game ever comes out, I'm dropping everything I'm doing and making a VR.
Okay, so I see a lot of love for the Black Ops games.
I recommend therapy. No, I have no idea where. Actually, I do have an idea where the source code. I can't believe I just said that and I'm being recorded. But it's not going to get released. I mean, it's someday you might be able to go to the Center for American History's video.
Was Gary Oldman in the Black Ops games, or was he in the Modern Warfare
Video Game Archive
games?
and find it
I
there.
think he
and do
played
something
like
amazing with it, but,
one character in one of them.
I'm not going to be releasing it anytime soon. And frankly, I don't know that
He was also the villain in one of the Spyro games.
long-form VR real-time movement through a 3D world is the best answer for
really
VR
weird.
anyway. Thank you.
That was Modern
System
Warfare.
Shock actually
right.
just supported VR in 1994, the last time VR was going to save us. Ooh, he said it. Yeah.
Hi, Warren. My name is Hugh. I run a small indie studio. So for you as a creator, where do you...
You can just see that sort of... see his body tense up when the guy says he runs a small indie studio, because he's like, is he going to hit me up for money on a public forum? Check it out.
To save us. Ooh, he said it.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Hi, Warren. My name is Hugh. I run a small indie studio. So for you as a creator, where do you draw the line between obviousness and subtlety, especially from a narrative standpoint? Because what I've found is that, like, we made a game where you're employed by a company whose logo is a black skull on a red banner, and people didn't get that they were the bad guys. So, like, I mean, like, where do you... I mean, System Shock, or not System Shock, excuse me. Deus Ex is a game that is mired in a lot of these subtleties and narrative elements, but I think also it seems like a lot of people still manage to get a lot of what was going on with that game. And like, as a designer, there are things that you might think are obvious that end up being very subtle to the consumer.
Well, wow, that's about 16 questions in one. First of all, have a great writing team. I had 4 writers. All of them, with one exception, were programmers who could write, not writers who we tried to make interactive writers. I think that helped.
Yes.
They were... I mean, like, one of the writers had a dual degree in creative writing and computer science from MIT and Harvard simultaneously. It's kind of easy to make an intelligent game when you've got.
That's also a really interesting thing to note about this era of making games, is that not everyone could do it. You kind of had to be one of the smartest people in the world, and you must have actually gone to like a school that taught computer science, which was a really difficult discipline back in the day. You needed to be one of the smartest living human beings in the world, like the top 1% of IQ or whatever, to have any chance of working here. And it's just like this funnel that just directed a lot of high quality people in. And as much as it is cool to see the entry level lowered so more people can sort of bring out their voice, there obviously just is a lot more trash, because we have more people making games today who frankly don't have a lot to say. Not that they shouldn't be allowed to make games, but this era, definitely just the quality to mediocrity sort of ratio is it's probably never going to be better than it was in this era. Well, this era is 2017, but
honestly, I don't worry about that too much. I'm the luckiest guy in the game business in that I get to make the games I want to make the way I want to make them. And I try to make games that I want to play or that I find appealing, and hope enough people find them appealing that I get to make another one. So subtlety and intelligence are important to me. And if I have to dumb down a game to sell 20 million copies, I'm going to not make games anymore.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the applause was a little weak for that one.
Hi, Warren. My name is Michael Hyam. I'm actually an editor at GameSpot.com.
Oh my god, I don't think the Germans are coming, guys. I think the ship has sailed.
Deus Ex means a lot to me, so I could ask you like a million questions, but I'm not going to do that. So I'd whittle it down to maybe one, maybe two.
Okay.
Sorry. So I want to ask, how much of a hand did you have in the sound design and the music? And was that made in parallel to the game, or did you... was it Alexander Brandon who composed most of the music?
Yeah.
Did you actively work with him? Because music in the game is one of the most standout things to me. And I was wondering if you had...
I still listen to the music all the time.
Yeah, me too.
And the System Shock soundtrack. Those are my 2 favorites. No, and Disney Epic Mickey. Those are the 3 that I still listen to. No, well, and there's a 4th. No. No, Alex worked, 3 doors down from me, and I was in his office all the time because I love sound. I mean, back then...
I love sound.
More than today, but even today, I mean, at some level, as great as our graphics are, we're still making radio plays, and
I wish Miyazaki did one of these conferences. Yeah, I think it would be really cool. I want to sit down with him. I'll bring Loki with me. Loki can translate from English and Japanese. and I just want to pick his brains. Like, hey man, what is this? What are you thinking? What is this about? What are you doing? Like, huh? I really want to just understand the man better. He's such a. I hate when people do this where they're just like an enigma. He only comes out of the woodworks every 2 years or so, and he does like an interview with some publication that is woefully, woefully unprepared to have a meaningful dialogue with him.
1997, that was even more true. So sound design was critical. I mean, audio designers, give yourself a pat on the back, or one person applauding. Again, as the game director, I had a slide that was the creative box. I mean, that's really important to me. It's my job to define the limits within which a game is going to exist. It's not my job to say.
And when somebody gets like a random conversation with him, it's always like, oh my god, you're gonna make Bloodborne 2? And he's like, well, it's a Sony game. Sony has to make Bloodborne 2. Like, they have to okay it. I would make a Bloodborne 2. I wouldn't mind, but Sony has to okay it.
I want a C major chord there. So, I kick things off, and then it's my job to make sure that everybody's staying in that box, right? And so it was the same with Alex. I mean, if he did a calliope thing, I probably would have said no, but he's a genius and did an amazing job, and the sound design on Deus Ex was incredible. But my role was mostly, saying, hey, that's really great, Alex. I think, are we out of time? I'm afraid we're out of time. So, like I said, I can take a few questions outside. Thanks a lot.
No Germans today. No. We'll rest happy knowing that he was probably assaulted by some Germans on the plane again. But yeah, that's Deus Ex Postmortem. Gonna remove it from the list. There we go. And anything you guys want to talk about, or do we want to just pull the plug on the stream? Obviously, you go to the Discord in the description. You can have more. I'll probably be awake for another half an hour, maybe an hour or so. So if you want to reach out, talk to me there. Before I leave. What before I leave, please? Kegare burp. Did I burp? Yeah, I'm so tired. I'm so sleepy. Good stuff, Israel. Look forward to more content. Thank you. I have 2 more Armored Core videos coming. That's Verdict Day and Armored Core 6. They're both up on Patreon right now. And I also have the Estes Grass video up there. So I have really sort of earned myself some free time to just program. When are you planning on streaming the How Destiny 2 Transformed Bungie GDC? I would really like to be there for it. I have no, I don't schedule streams to the day. Sorry. Sorry. The best way of knowing would probably be, you know what? I'll do like a few hours heads up stream for that one. I'll try to remember. So if you're on the Discord, you can sort of see, or if you're on Twitter, you can see the announcement for that a bit early. Have I thought about doing a deep dive on poison swamps? I feel like, I feel like there's not a lot to say. I know it's like a joke question, but it's like you don't need a 12-minute video talking about the secret meaning of poison swamps. It's like, no, why do they do poison swamps? Keikare, just, it's fun. I don't know. It's like interesting levels, interesting challenge. I don't know. Thanks for the stream. It was a pleasure. Thanks for watching. When will I do a video on Drakengard? I won't. I played Drakengard. I did all my notes. I hated the game, and I just couldn't bring myself to keep working on it. I talked to Casey about it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, this game is meant to be like that. You're meant to hate it. It's like one of those games that's like the point is that it's you're playing as a bad guy. It's like a genocidal game or whatever." And I was like, "Well, that's great. I still hated it." So that, that's kind of an unsatisfying answer, and it really sort of sucks because I think it would have been fun if I had really appreciated Drakengard, but sadly I really didn't, and I feel like I don't really love making a video that's like overly negative, because I feel you could probably talk more about positivity, Do you announce streams willy-nilly, or do you operate on a schedule? It's really, some days I'll be like, I'll stream in 8 hours, and then I do an announcement. And some days it's like today, I'm like, hey, assholes, I'm streaming in 40 minutes. But for Destiny, I'll try to remember to announce it a bit in advance. Any videos on Dark Souls 2 or 3? Not planned. I think Dark Souls 2 is more interesting. I think if I were... I don't know. Like, I don't have a lot to say about those games. Because I don't particularly love them. I don't think they are great games. I think they are very underwhelming continuations of a much more interesting game in Dark Souls 1. But I do think there's some interesting stuff in there. Maybe a video just on that. I don't know. But nothing planned right now. Yeah. Did you at least experience Drakengard's E ending? What do you think? What do you think? You think I was playing Drakengard, hating every minute of it, and I was like, well, I'm gonna replay it, and I'm gonna get another ending, and I'm gonna get the E ending. You think that's what happened? Nah, I only beat it the one time. Sorry, I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm gonna go. Do some doodlings for boss fight, and then I'm gonna go to sleep. If you wanna continue chatting at all, see you on the Discord. Bye bye.